Be on just me. Well, while I'm getting this thing started, there's a bunch of sort of reflective things I want to do, and I might start you one of those while I try to get this technology working. So let me just pop this up. If you would navigate to the schedule for a second and click on let's see, navigate to our schedule, and that's not the schedule. I just shut the schedule accidentally. And click on the space where you were making responses. Click on the link to, I don't know why my screen goes so small on me. Click on the SIP feedback space, which is right here, notes on alumni responses to SIP presentation. And what you will see is there's a slot in that notes at the very end. So if you're at the top of this document, you can either scroll all the way to the bottom, or you can just click on G here, post-presentation reflections. And I want you to take a moment and jot down your comments in response to two different prompts. One of those prompts is I see I've stuck your names in here. One of those prompts is, what were the most important things you learned from the experience of presenting in terms of your own presentation skills and about the SIP stories you were presenting? And then the second section is basically what you learned from audience members. So the first is what you learned from your own experience. And then the second is what you learned from people who were participating in the sessions, what you feel is the most important things you learned. Before looking at that, one thing to put up. Test 1, 2, 3.
I'm just gonna give you about 30 more seconds.
All right, let's do this thing. We're gonna do a quick go round and you can pass. You have less than a minute to provide an insight in either category, but you can't talk for a long time. We're just trying to get things that you think you really learned from either presenting or from our audience. Who wants to start? Go ahead.
Something I learned from presenting is expect the unexpected. Although we have a plan of what's gonna happen in our presentation, there's a lot of things that could happen. For example, the hotel is super noisy, so a lot of us had to project more than we usually would in our presentations. Or sometimes people would click on something and go into a wrong slide. Basically, we just need to be prepared and be confident and continue going even when things happen that might screw us up.
Okay, cool.
Basically that I realized the importance of engaging with the audience. And that I realized looking back on it that no matter how prepared I could have been script-wise for being there, if I wasn't engaging the audience, they wouldn't have gotten what they got out of it. I feel like they got a lot out of it. So
Okay, cool.
I learned that I just learned how important it is to actually understand what you're presenting about, because other than just memorizing lines, when you actually know what you're talking about, it just makes it easier to present. You don't have to just try to remember the points, but you can just talk about something you know. And it just makes your speech feel more natural, and it's easier to just ad-lib other ideas.
Yeah, I don't think that I had enough time personally to memorize the script in the best way that works for me. So I think I didn't come across super confident in my presentation because I wasn't. But yeah, just figuring out how to fake it till I make it and making sure that I'm, have enough time to work on.
There were two things I was trying to simultaneously practice. One was the keeping information in my head and using that to improvise more so that my presentation style was more conversational and I could adapt to specific circumstances and audience questions. And the second was learning how to keep the information in my head when it came to this specific type of story-driven content.
I think for me it's similar to Hannah, just expect the unexpected, prepare for the worst to succeed. Because I actually never ended up doing a section I practiced for. I ended up doing any section I could pick up. So
yeah, I think I really learned how to be confident in what I'm presenting. I definitely felt very intimidated by the assignment. I was I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. How am I gonna be able to do this? And I just learned what worked for me until I felt confident.
I will just say, as an audience member, your feeling intimidated definitely did not come across in your presentation. I'll just say that. You came across as having a great deal of confidence in what you're doing.
I feel what I did a different route than a lot of people because I didn't really try to memorize the script. I just tried to memorize the key points and just put my own spin on it because I wanted to actually I think I was telling you about this a little bit before, actually sound like a college student. And I think that was a really good choice because it taught me that if you're having fun up there, they're gonna have fun watching you. and I don't know, like, it was a little spotty, cause I like, you know, at some points I like lost my confidence and like would turn to like my like notes and just start reading off the script, but I think like once I hit my stride, it was really easy for me to like just kind of keep going in my own words and like, I don't know, I could feel the audience engaging with me, so yeah.
Is this about both reflection?
It is about both, although everyone so far has focused strictly on their own experiences, but it was intended to be about both, your choice, but people are choosing to focus on their experiences. But if you want to go the other route, go for it, Sam.
Okay, yeah, I mean, this is what my project is on, so, I mean, just off the top of my head, some things the alumni said were like comparing the live data to benchmarks that make it like immediately clear like where we are at. And just like some of the language we use, making it a bit clearer, not including that water in the heating and cooling live data section.
By the way, that's already gone.
So you've been talking like in this class about like adapting to like your audience, and this was like a really good example of that, I think. And just like, yeah, a good example of how the like rhetorical situation kind of informs how you present. And like, I just think that because like when we were presenting as though we were like in a class and giving like a presentation to our teacher, they seemed like a little bit less engaged. And yeah, we were talking about kind of like how the alumni might want to like see themselves in us, because you know, we're supposed to be like youthful like college students. And then in regards to like what I think they responded well to, I noticed that they always or most of them like gravitated towards like the real-time data, like a lot of them seemed interested in that. And same thing with like the emotional characters and like cartoons, that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think just like eye contact with the audience, like and engagement throughout, it's like based on how well practiced you are, as well as like your ability to like read their sort of like reactions throughout. And then participants were interested in seeing data over the course of years as opposed to just days.
Cool, excellent. I will say that, you know, as someone who watched every single one of your presentations, I think in general, you guys did a really, really nice job of taking the experience seriously, preparing for the experience, and being sufficiently prepared that most of you, I think, were sort of in the moment with the audience, and I think the audience sensed that and were with you in that moment. And although in some ways I would have liked our events to be better attended, no fault of ours, I think we did get a lot of really good feedback from folks who were at every one of these presentations. And so I think we produced lots of useful information for the groups that are going to be focused on the SIP project. So I think, you know, mission accomplished from that perspective. And, you know, again, I think as a first round of presentation in this course, I think you guys definitely took it seriously. And I think some of you were extraordinarily well prepared. And for those of you who presented multiple times, there are several of you who I commented on. I could see your sort of growth and adjustment based on what you learned in each particular presentation. I could see that evolving over time. And it was great to see people really trying to use each of these as a real learning experience and then bringing that in to the next presentation. So that was just great. And I think you guys should feel good about your work. I certainly do. All right, let's do a very quick go around. This will be even quicker. Just any particular insight you feel like you gained from the signatures assignment or problems you experienced with it, whatever. That there's a group focused on this, and so this feedback is useful to this group. Luke and Josette are both going to be working on this exercise in the school. So let's do a real quick go around. You don't need to say much. Anything that struck you about the exercise, something you feel like you learned from the exercise, something could be improved. It's anything. Who wants to start on this one? Okay, we'll go ahead.
It just really made me even more aware of my resource use because I was looking at my dorm building. Like I felt like I was like pretty aware of my resource use, but I was like like even now, like I'm thinking more and more about it, and I'm like constantly unplugging things and turning things off when I don't need to, because I'm like, hey, I don't wanna be part of this data that's higher than usual, let's make it lower.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Ditto on that with co-ops, because like I make breakfast in the morning and then I pot sink everything. And I mean, turning on like 3 full-size sinks like this big and pouring water into those and then cleaning them out. And it's like a lot of water use, and you can see it just go up like 100 gallons per hour for like that one time, where it's probably just me making breakfast.
So do you feel like you saw your own behavior in
Oh
that?
yeah, oh yeah.
That's very cool.
'Cause I'm one of the few people up at that time.
Oh, that's very
Yeah,
cool. So you
so-
were personally responsible for all the destruction to
Oh, yeah.
That's a
But the
good-
thing is, it goes up and it goes right back down. It's like, but yeah, no, it's very interesting. I interested to see gas use in keep as well. I think it would correlate very similarly with the other like cook shifts and stuff, but I interested to see the time that isn't cook shifts, like how people are using it when it's not the whole co-op's use.
I'm trying to think whether I think that building is not on SIP, so it actually has a gas-fired boiler. So you've got a combination of cooking and heating and the
Yes.
heat in that building, so you've got the superimposition of like cooking and
I was thinking
heating.
cooking gas in this case.
Yeah, but it's the same,
But
it's the
yeah.
same system, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
I was also thinking about like co-op water use and things like that, cause like as Max was saying, every time we like do personal cooking, we need a pot sink, everything, and it just, yeah, we fill up these giant entire sinks just to like wash a pan.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just like brainstorming like ways that we could maybe try to like mitigate those issues. I don't know.
Yeah, I looked at like quite a few buildings as I was doing this just because it was so interesting to me, but I was like looking at the resource use in mud, and there's like still such high like energy and water use even when no one's in there, which is super interesting to me. Yeah, I was also,
Definitely worth
I was
asking
also, like,
questions about
'cause-
that.
because I work at ASIS, so I was like thinking about how like that contributes to the water and energy use throughout the day.
Right. Little side note that in Stevie, there was a real mystery for a while about why it continuously used water all the time and whether there was some sort of leak. And then we figured out what it was. Does anyone want to guess what device within Stevie is always using water?
Ice machine?
Yes, good. Yasmela, you nailed it. Because they just make ice and they just let it melt. They don't turn it off ever. They just continuously make ice. Obviously, you don't need to use it that way. You could have it stop at, whatever the last meal shift is, and then start making ice sometime in the morning and just shut off the water, but that's not the way it runs. It's just continuous flow of water into there.
Well, now I'm thinking about, cause like the ice machine at ASIS, like that's,
Oh,
I
you
think
have the same,
that's constantly
Ah.
on, because like,
I didn't know you had an ice machine.
yeah, cause if it's not on during the night, like we'll make ice, then we won't have ice to make drinks. So I think that's.
But
probably
presumably you could turn it on at like, 5 in the morning or something and you'd have ice.
Well, no one's in there at 5 in the
You know what
morning.
I'm saying, you
Like,
could automate it,
hypothetically,
you could
yeah.
automate it, you'd have to put a shut off
Yeah.
valve in to sort of basically shut water off. And control water so that it's off between the time it closes, in the ice maker and some time in the morning. Anyway, cool stuff. Luke, you wanna,
Pass.
okay, fine.
I was looking at my room too, and I was like wondering why there's so much water use. Cause mine is Zeke, and we're small, so I'm like, why are we using so much water? And like for the, like before when it was like Eco Olympics, we were doing really bad on water, and it was because the toilet like kept
Stuck.
kept running. So then I think that issue has stopped. So I'm like, what could it be that's causing this?
Well, I will say this about, you wanna say something, Max?
I do. When I was eco rep last semester in Eco places where like they're using like more water, like it's like the stats were actually crazy. Like we're like, wait, how is this adding
I
up?
don't know.
And so we were like, it was like, I won't say like twice, I don't know the stats, it was like maybe somewhere around like twice as much as people in like Burton. And that's like a more like per person. And it was like, what? So we're trying to figure it out.
Especially like the average was okay, but when I looked up the everyday data, it would be like a really, really high peaks at certain times.
Yeah, the patterns are really important. If you ever see a building that has continuous water use, a residential building that has continuous water use, that's a leak. Whereas the spikes are something other than leak. I did get on, in preparation for the work that you guys are gonna do in the, in Langston. I got on Langston's last week and just sort of perused it. And they had clearly sprung a leak about 2 weeks ago and were using 350 gallons an hour continuously.
Wait, is it
Never went
elementary,
below that.
this is elementary school?
No, this is the middle school.
There's something up at the elementary school.
Yeah, I noticed that
Like something
too.
serious.
Oh,
Yeah, there's something, like they're using so much.
Oh, really?
compared to other schools.
Oh,
Yes.
I just checked out Langston because we were doing we were planning on doing the exercise and then I was just checking out, and I sent an email to the superintendent of the school district and to the facilities person, and they're like, oh shit.
Yeah, you need to get that checked out.
I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, as I say, we had a water leak one year in Eastern Elementary. I think I've told this anecdote. The little kid saw the fish exhibiting crazy behavior. Have I already told you this anecdote?
I
No,
don't think so, no.
It was during an Eco-Olympics, and I got a call from the woman who was then the principal of that school. Her name was Susan Alig, and she literally called me up and she said, the fish is exhibiting crazy behavior. The kids in the school, and this was K-4, so this is little kids. The kids are really upset about what's going on with the fish. Your system is broken, fix it. Like she like the school was really upset. And so like I dropped whatever else I was doing, because it's like anything in my life is not as important as, you know, small children being upset because of the fish. So I dropped everything, dug into the data, looked at it, and I got back to her within half an hour and I said, there is no explanation but that you have a massive, massive water leak in that school. And it's been going on actually for months. And we figured out they have what's called a hydronic heating system, which is just, it's like our systems, it's like our campus system where, you know, you have hot water flowing through all the radiators. That had a leak below the ground level, so that basically the heating system was leaking into the storm sewer. So there's no water anyone was seeing anywhere, no sound of water flowing, because it was sort of buried in the floor in a wall,
How do you find that?
basically. I didn't find it, I just knew that there was a leak,
Yeah.
you know? Anyway, we did calculations, and by stopping that leak, we just said, okay, what would happen if that leak had lasted for the rest of the year? It had literally been going on for months. And the water bill that we saved them, assuming that they would have found it by the new year, we saved them $20,000 in water bills. And all the credit goes to the kids for seeing the fish.
My question is, how does it take a month to see that though? Couldn't it have been normalized?
You
by
know
then?
what, I called, well, you know, it was right before Eco-Olympics, so I think people have been seeing the fish doing crazy stuff and it hadn't bothered them until Eco-Olympics, and then it's like, wait a minute, we're trying to conserve water. And she said the kids have been doing everything in their power to conserve water, and the fish was just exhibiting the same crazy behavior regardless of what they did. So they had begun to really engage in conservation activities, and the fish was totally unresponsive to their conservation activities. So that was the trigger.
Oh,
yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah, $20,000 in water that year,
And kids,
to the credit of
Right.
small children who found that. Anyway, we're still going. Who are we on? Josette, we were on you.
I've done this assignment before,
I thought no one had done it before.
I think I did it,
Oh,
but it
okay.
looked different.
Yeah, it was a different software.
Yeah, and I think it's a really great way to like visualize, like, especially like, cause you can look at your dorms and like the
Right.
room that you're in every day and start to like think about, okay,
Right.
why is this happening? Like,
Right.
what could the reason for this be? One thing I will say is it did feel pretty repetitive, like it felt like
Yeah,
I was giving the same reasons for
Right.
stuff.
right,
And
right.
that was like my one qualm with it, but.
right. The concept behind that exercise was there's an energy signatures assignment, and then there was a second assignment for more advanced classes called problem solving with building OS, because that's what the old technology was called. And that one was much more sort of define your own problem and investigate it. This one was more like the objective was basically to take them through the different applications so that they thought about the different applications. And that was the concept, but I totally hear what you're saying about repetitiveness, and that's definitely something we should be thinking about, Luke and Sadie. So Sadie, you go.
For me, like maybe this is like my own like lack of creativity, but like something I just struggled with was like for water coming up with like a solution that wasn't just like take shorter showers. Because I feel like unless you're like in a co-op and you're cooking, like there's not much else that like you're using a lot of water for, like maybe like turn off the sink while you're brushing your teeth. So that was just something that like, and like maybe there is something, there are like exceptions, like the Zeke toilet or whatever, but like, and maybe that was just something that like I struggled with, cause I just wasn't being the most creative, but like, yeah, I'm thinking that just like, it's kind of aggravating almost.
But just, not that I want to be reflecting on everyone's comments, but just to point out, one of the things the exercise does talk about is there's really two major, when you're thinking about conserving anything, there are two major categories. There's human behavior and what can you do with human behavior, take shorter showers, turn the water off when you brush your teeth, et cetera, kind of limited on that. But then there's management of the building, and you do have at least some control over both of those. You know, minimally, you can submit work orders when you think things are broken. But there is sort of the category, there's like what you can do, what you as a community can do, and what you can do to change the management of the building. And obviously those kids had no power to fix that leak other than finding it and complaining about it, but that was sufficient actually. I mean, actually, after talking with the principal, my next call was to this guy, Andy Haupt, who's a really funny guy. He's the janitor of all the schools. He's sort of the facilities person. And I said, Andy, you've got a major leak in that school. And he said, you know, I kind of thought maybe we did, but I got a lot on my plate right now. And I think that maybe I'll deal with that over the summer. And I said, that's not gonna work. You got a bunch of upset children in that school now, that's not gonna fly. So, you know, like as a building manager, it's like, for most of them, resource conservation is sort of last on their list. If no one's complaining about something, it's not a problem for them, you know? So that's a thing to understand too. It's like, you know, yeah. All right, cool, Sim.
I have to pass because I am signed yet to do this, so I apologize.
Yeah, what I'm getting out of this conversation is that this assignment can have like real world benefits, and I think that's really cool. And I agree with what Josette said about like certain questions, like, yeah, I guess like,
Repetitive.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I did King for both parts of the assignment. I didn't like read ahead to see what the questions were, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll just keep doing King. And then I, found myself reusing the same explanation. So I would definitely think about that if I were redesigning the assignment.
Well, anyone who has any particular ideas on how it could be, how there could be more creativity in that and less redundancy. Because not only are we trying to redesign that assignment for Langston, you know, it's new software, new setup, so we're planning on doing that in Environmental Studies 101, so all of the incoming students as well. So any ideas people have are very welcome, because there will be lots of people using that assignment. Okay, all right, cool. So, well, real quickly, just as one last little round robin brainstorm, most of you are being quite good about the reflections on the assigned readings. And I just want to take a moment, maybe not a complete round robin here, but anyone who wants to say something about, you know, insights they gleaned in sort of reviewing the proposals as kind of a segue into talking about proposals. So again, I've glanced through a lot of this. There's some really cool reflections in here, but anyone who wants to sort of reflect on things they feel like they learned about proposal writing in preparation for today's discussion. Yeah.
I feel like you have to operate in this middle ground of meeting like exact and like very niche and specific requirements that whatever proposal or like grant you're applying for like has,
Right.
while also being as informative as possible, and like basically you have to like function off of the assumption that they don't know anything about what you're doing, and like you being as clear as possible and like specific as possible about like what are your goals and like how you want to meet these goals while also being really narrow and like their the grants requirements.
Their evaluation
Yeah.
criteria is really what it comes down to, really matching. That's a really great insight. Anyone have any other yes, Jane?
Yeah, so before doing this, I kind of thought as like about proposals and grants as being like a way to get like money and approval and stuff like that, but from reading through like what everyone wrote for their projects, like I'm seeing that they function as like blueprints basically, and like they kind of,
Totally.
yeah, they like plan out their project, so I can see myself like writing the proposal and then like coming back to it, you know, because they have all their goals, they have their process kind of mapped out.
That's a really great insight too. They are a plan. You think of them as, right, when you hear people talk about writing grant proposals, oftentimes you think about, oh, it's like a chore you need to do to get someone to give you money. And on one level, it is that, but it's also a plan. It's many things. So it's good that you saw that. And I will make this case as we get into talking about grant writing. But I think grant writing is also an incredibly creative process, and one that's super useful to refining your thinking about what you want to do and why you want to do it. I learn a lot from writing grant proposals. And yeah, anyone else have anything they want to share about, you know, any kind of insights gleaned from the readings before we kind of dive into grant writing? Yes.
I thought it was interesting when you were talking about with the grants you were applying to from the Great Lakes Science Center, how you had to increase the emphasis on water use management and water conservation.
Right, that's actually the Great Lakes Protection Fund, but
Sorry,
yes,
Great Lakes Protection Fund.
right.
To actually get that funding, and then because you changed the emphasis on the project to like, you talked about the project in a way that emphasized that and emphasized those connections between water and electricity, that actually changed what the project was doing. Max, you good?
I wasn't joking.
Yeah, I think this actually connects back to Josette's insight as well, which is that, you know, if you learn anything from this class, I would say learn this. Everything is storytelling. Everything you do is some form of storytelling. The thing about writing a grant proposal is there are two stories. There's the story you want to tell, and there's the story the person who's the people who are offering money want to hear. And your job as a grant writer is to bring those two stories together into one narrative, which is your story and it's their story. And to get to Luke's point, that process of bringing together their desired story and your desired story is actually creative, and sometimes it makes you change what your story is in a way that's actually quite constructive and useful. So that creative process is like any other creative process. When you exhibit, when you're an artist, you work within some media, and the media itself has certain constraints to it, and you can be irritated by those constraints, or you can look at those constraints as creative opportunities that, you know, you have to match your own creative energy to the particular things that you can do with this particular media, you know? So it's really no different from any creative process. Max?
I was gonna add, it's a lot like college applications.
Yeah, sure. I mean, grant proposals are really exactly the same as fellowship applications for college. Anything where you're trying to sell an idea or sell yourself. And I think I've already said this in this class, but I'm sort of talking about grant writing in both classes at the same time now. So it's possible I may confuse what I've said in different classes. But what I will say, maybe for the second time here, is you should apply for every fellowship you possibly can apply for. Did I already say that in this class or not? Okay, well, let me say it to you. You should apply for every possible fellowship that you can, that you have the opportunity to apply for. You know, not going overboard, you can waste a lot of time doing that. but it's a good experience. And there's one real key to understand in this process, and that is that the more success you have in acquiring resources through fellowships and grants, the more likely you are to have future success, which you may think, well, that's unfair. Why do people who get more? It is the way it works. It just is. People are much more likely to give you resources if you've gotten resources before and been successful in using those resources to do good things with those resources. So the earlier you can start applying for any kind of scholarship, even if it's a small scholarship. How many of you are sophomores here, juniors here? There's a fellowship that Ohio EPA offers. It's purportedly a fellowship in environmental science, but many Oberlin students have won this fellowship in the past. So it's as fellowships goes, it's not that competitive. But getting that on your resume is great because it is a stamp of approval. And I'm trying to remember whether it's only open to sophomores or only open to juniors. It's people who are going into their junior year. It's one or the other, but remind me and I'll send you a sort of a link to it. But if you think you might be at all competitive, think about applying for it because it's only a few $1,000, but we did that. We talked about the signatures assignment. Yes.
It's $5,000.
What?
I found it. I'm looking it up.
Did I encourage you to do that before?
No, I found it out, but I was looking into Oberlin. I'm looking into scholarships to apply for it so I could make college affordable. Yeah,
and I'm just telling you that maybe we've had 15 environmental studies students get that over the years. It's
What is it called?
it's called
it's called the Ohio Academy of Sciences.
Oh, maybe
Is
different.
that
Maybe
what
a
it-
different one. I don't know. I found it on the Oberlin EPA website, and it's
Ohio EPA website.
yeah, Ohio EPA
It's
website.
the same one.
It's under environmental education and then careers and scholarships.
Yeah, if you click on the links, it'll eventually say Ohio Academy of Sciences or something like that if you click through the links. All right, let me say a few things about the schedule coming up before we go into proposal writing. So there's quite a bit of information about your proposals, including proposal templates. Let me just click on that for a moment. All of this is in the links, but right. So you will notice if you click, you can find this under the assignment drop. You can find it in various places, but this has templates for every project in this class with your names next to it. So these are basically templates for your proposal. I'll go ahead and open one and say a little bit about the information in them. So there's information in the project assignments that gives you a lot of information about proposal writing. But when you write your proposal, you will be writing it in one of these templates. Let me just make this thing a little bit bigger. So you could open up your template right now if you want. That wouldn't be a terrible thing to do. And take a look at this. How I've tried to structure this is the way that, normal proposals. So when an organization is offering money to do something, usually it changes over time what they want to give money for. So an organization like Ohio EPA or US EPA or National Science Foundation or Cleveland Foundation or Gun Foundation or any number of the many, many, many people out there who will give you money to do projects does is they say, you know what, our priority this year should be X, Y, and Z. And they'll put out what's called an RFP. RFP stands for, anyone know?
Request for proposals.
Request for proposals.
Talking about this already.
Yeah, right. So request for proposals, the RFP is what you're responding to, and it'll have some due date and say, applications for this money are due on this. And they will describe their priorities, and your goal again is to align what you want to do. I mean, you might look in an RFP and say, yeah, I'm actually not interested. What they want to do doesn't really relate to what I want to do. So I'm not gonna bother. And that's fine. So I'm always out there looking for RFPs that look like they match things I might want to do. And then they'll have a particular format for writing a proposal. Every organization has their own format. for how they want a proposal. There's a general commonality to how things are structured, and I've chosen a fairly generic structure here for the format we're gonna follow in this class, which has a lot in common with almost every proposal that you would write. But you know, you'll obviously have a title to your proposal, but you will notice there's information at the top about how I want you to use this, and then you can delete everything above proposal title there once you've gotten the instructions down. But do not delete the evaluation criteria under each of these. Look at those evaluation criteria and make sure that your proposal is sort of answered affirmatively by each of those criteria. So in every section of this proposal, I've listed the criteria that your evaluators will use to assess each of these sections. So the criteria are how your proposal will be assessed. And the best grant giving organizations will give you very specific criteria. Oftentimes, they will tell you how many points. Oftentimes your proposals are scored on a point scale, and they'll tell you how many points you get for each thing. If you took a look at the OEF grant, you could see there was a point system, and we were rated on points, how many points we earned for each section. And there's some things that we weren't gonna get any points on. You know, I think one of their criteria was, are you affecting, does this have a beneficial effect for, you know, Native and Indigenous people? And it was like, in my particular proposal, there wasn't really an opportunity to pitch on that level. There wasn't anything to do there. So I'm like, I'm not gonna get those points. That's okay. And try to get the other points. But you know, you basically wanna write your proposal to match the criteria that are published by the grant giving entity, so that you are aligning your story with the story that they wanna hear and the structure of the story they wanna hear. Does that make sense? All right, so you guys all have your proposals there. I'm gonna go ahead, so your proposal is actually due, so I'll talk a little bit about the process here. Your proposal is due Saturday by midnight. And we're moving towards a Tuesday panel review. So when you submit proposals to grant giving organizations, most of them will convene a panel of experts in the field who will review the proposal. Sometimes individuals in that panel are assigned to review only a certain number of proposals, so people don't have too much work to do. We're gonna go through exactly that process in this class, where each of you is going to be assigned a couple proposals to review in preparation for next Tuesday's class. And in next Tuesday's class, we will run a proposal review panel. Basically, we'll break down into groups, and you will be working together with people who have reviewed the same proposal, and you'll be talking about that proposal and about you know, what was done well in the proposal, what needs work in the proposal, what it would require to be ranked highly, those sorts of things. So that's what we're working towards. That's why these deadlines are actually quite tight deadlines. You gotta have the thing done by Saturday, so people have until Monday to review proposals, and then you will review them before the Tuesday class, and then we'll have our review panels on Tuesday. Again, I'm trying to match the process that occurs in the real world for funding proposals. Yeah.
You mean like at midnight, does it mean like when Friday turns to Saturday or when Saturday turns to Sunday?
It's when Saturday turns to Sunday.
Okay.
It's midnight on Saturday.
Because that also could mean like 12 AM, like at 10/5.
Professors have done it where Saturday at midnight means as soon as.
Means Friday?
You gotta say
Yes.
11:59
Oh, yeah, no, we're
PM.
not doing that.
So it's Saturday at 11:59 PM.
Saturday at midnight. You've got
But
all of
Saturday-
that,
no,
you
no,
have
no,
that,
no.
what I'm saying, Jane, is you have that entire minute left at 12. You've got a whole minute left.
That would be Sunday though.
No, it wouldn't be Sunday, it's not Sunday until the 59th second, until the 60th second, and then it's Sunday. I'm not encouraging you to stay up late on Saturday doing this, get it done tomorrow, and then, you know, it's irrelevant. Although you may benefit from waiting until Thursday, because Thursday's class, we're gonna spend a significant amount of time in doing some brainstorming, doing basically project conferencing. So I'll be able to answer questions, you'll be able to bounce ideas off me. So the more you can get done before Thursday, the better, because if you come in Thursday having actually met with your group and talked about it a little bit, that's to your benefit, because the further you are along, the more helpful I can be when we conference on this. Yes.
A big bucks question. Are we making these proposals in our group project or the individual?
Oh, this is your group.
Okay, good.
Totally,
I was
this
like,
is your group, yes, yes. Your group is just 2 people, but yes,
yes.
it's a small group. You will know, there's a phenomenon that I'm sure you're familiar with called the free rider phenomenon, when
Yes.
someone does more work than other people do, which is it's like the tragedy of the commons, or any common pool resource situation has this issue, but when there's only 2 people, it's pretty clear who's doing the work and who's not doing the
Also,
work.
it's harder to have that scenario.
Don't be a free rider, contribute. All right, so what I wanna do now is actually talk about the process of writing grants. So many of you are going to have careers in which it is important to write proposals. And this is true in if you go on in the sciences, social science or natural sciences, if you go on in the nonprofit world, also if you go on in the business world. People write proposals. If you have a company that offers services to other people, generally you will submit a proposal to your potential clients that says, we could do X, Y, and Z for you, and it's gonna cost us much money to do it. And if you're Oberlin College and you have a project you need done, you will send out an RFP to a bunch of entities which might do the project. Evergreen is a good example. So they got the big project for planning carbon neutrality for Oberlin College. There were maybe 10 proposals we reviewed from different organizations which offered to provide similar services. And we were impressed by the proposal that came from Evergreen. So we hired Evergreen, and they've made bucket loads of money off Oberlin ever since then, because they won the award. So I'm just saying, they're a business. Actually, they're kind of a cool nonprofit, to be honest. They're not actually a for-profit business. They're very cool kind of a company, but they're a company nonetheless. They provide services. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the funding process. I want to sort of like I want to talk about the process of writing proposals from a number of different perspectives. So when we talk about sustainability, we talk about this convergence between ecology, society, and economy. And when you're writing proposals, you're kind of focused on that piece of it. How can you acquire money that allows you to build more positive relationships in this system that includes people, the planet, and the money that makes the world go round. So that's kind of what we're focused on here. This money component, how you get money. And so I'm gonna talk about this again from a couple different perspectives. And feel free to stop me and ask me questions at any point on this. But one of the most important parts of proposal writing is having good ideas. You're trying to have a good idea that you can sell to someone else, that you would like to execute. So idea generation is absolutely critical, and generating ideas is for most of us about defining problems that need to be solved. So there's some problem out there, needs to be solved, and you have an idea for how to solve that particular problems. And you also, your organization has a particular realm of problem solving that they're involved in. And so obviously you need to align the problems you want to solve with the capacity of your organization. If your organization is focused on water conservation, you're not going to try to solve problems that relate to air pollution, because that's not in the bailiwick of your organization. So generate ideas that make sense for your entity that you represent to solve. You need to acquire resources to solve those problems. So part of that is identifying who's got money to do that. And that might, on the face of it, seem straightforward, but actually a lot of the challenge and the creativity in grant writing is finding people who have money. And it's hard to do and trying to find the right networks. So the Great Lakes Protection Fund grant, which we've talked about briefly, that's the largest grant I've been awarded. That was $812,000, so significant money. And the only way I found out about that RFP is that a former student of mine bumped into someone who was talking about this thing, and he emailed me and said, "Hey, John, this seems like totally up your alley, this particular thing. I never would have known about it if this student this former student hadn't seen this and contacted me and said, hey, this RFP looks like it really fits with what you're doing." And I'm like, yeah, I never would have found out about it otherwise. So you've got to have your ears open. There are databases of resources. My wife, Nancy, who some of you met at my party, is a professional grant writer. That's what she does for a living, which, by the way, is a pretty cool gig, being a professional grant writer. So if you're interested in writing, if you're interested in problem solving, there are a lot of organizations out there who desperately need people who are good at writing grant proposals. So it's a good gig. She actually worked. I mean, she was self-employed. It turns out that Boys and Girls Club, local Boys and Girls Club, liked her services so much that they gave her endless work, and she never ended up working for anyone else after working for a few other people. But officially, she was a contractor, but they just kept on hiring her to do work. She raised millions of dollars for them every year. She was by far their best fundraiser ever. She quit because she felt like she quit just this summer. It's a little bit of an aside, but her challenge was she felt like the administration of the organization had gotten too bloated, that too much of the money she was raising was going towards administration and not enough of it was going towards the mission of serving the kids. And at some point she felt like, I can't in good conscience raise money when so much of the money I'm raising is going to administrators who have bloated salaries. I'm just not on board with this. And so she quit. So that's the thing, but anyways, she's very good at finding funding sources. Although you get a niche, she became very good at a particular kind of government funding called 21st century grants. She's like the Ohio expert on 21st century grants. She really knows how to apply for these things and get the money out of them. So sometimes if you're a grant writer, you sort of, you hone your skills towards, and especially government grants, some of them are extraordinarily bureaucratic in the particular requirements they have that you need to sort of fulfill. And so you develop a lot of expertise in this particular setup, this particular grant program. And that's what she did. Okay, so you identify funds, you write grants, and then you implement the project. So, and as you implement projects, there's always more design that occurs in the process. You have an idea about what you're going to do, and this varies depending on the particular, kind of projects you do. So for instance, Nancy's work with Boys and Girls Club, it was pretty specific in terms of exactly what they were going to do. They were going to run a bunch of programs, maybe after school programs for kids. They were going to provide they were going to provide teaching that provided these additional skills and help to these kids in this context. That's what they were going to do. And they were assessed basically on how they did that. If you're doing research projects like me, your funders tend to be much more flexible because to some extent they know that you as someone doing something for the first time don't really know what you're doing, and that they're going to give you the flexibility to figure it out a little bit. So you say, I'm going to do this, and then you start doing this and you realize, actually, I need to do something a little bit different. You reach back out to the funder and say, can we do something a little bit different? And my experience with almost all funders who I've had, they say, yes, you can do something different. Just submit a change to your proposal and we'll adjust it and allow you to shift money in your budget to do the different thing that you think is going to be more productive. And really everyone wins in that situation, because if it turns out what you propose, you can't do exactly what you propose to do, but you can do something related that accomplishes the same goals. They want you to do that thing that's going to accomplish the same goals. So, you got the money, you design what you're going to do, based on the money you did get, you execute on that, and then you assess what you did. And the way this works is different if you've got a research project versus if you've got some sort of program you're executing where you're not, you're, for instance, teaching kids, going back to, the kind of work that Nancy does. But in either case, you do need to gather data. It's very important to the grant agency to know that you did what you said you were gonna do. Because the grant agency itself is reporting to people. They may be reporting to higher up people in the government. They may be reporting to people who give them money to do what they're doing. So in all cases, in the process of doing a project, you're gonna collect some sort of data which someone can use to evaluate the success of your project. Yeah, was that a question? So did you have a question?
Oh,
Looked to
no.
me like you were thinking about asking a question. And then this goes back to what I was saying earlier. In almost all cases, with almost all grants, you're doing some sort of adaptive management where you're actually changing what you're doing based on what you learn. And it will certainly be the case in all of your projects that as you begin to do something, you will learn things that will cause you to change the way you're doing things. And hopefully change it in ways that improve what you're doing. So that's just adaptive management. Changing what you do while you're doing it to maximize the value you're trying to get for the project you're trying to do and for the funders. And then, typically, and again, these things do vary according to the nature of the money you've acquired, but communication, you've done something important in the world and you need to communicate that minimally back to your funder. But if it's a research proposal, then one of your largest objectives is to learn something that's important to the larger world, and then you're going to communicate that information to the larger world so that they can benefit from whatever you learned, and the world will be a better place for whatever you learned in the process. And part of the communication is also about promotion. I feel like in some ways this is one of the things I should be better at. That I don't put enough time into is trying to get good media on what you've done, because it helps you get more money if people in the larger world are recognizing and excited about what you've done. So that's something, but reports, publications, those are all part of the communication. Presentations are going to be a big part of what you do, talks to present that information to people. All right, any questions on anything I've said so far? All right. Money, people. Okay, now I'm gonna talk about the process from a slightly different angle. So that was one model, kind of a linear model from start to finish of what you do. This is a slightly more circular model of what you do. That this model is a little bit more focused on the creativity involved in this process, because it is a very creative process. So you were obviously trying to come up with good ideas for problems that would be good to solve. So we don't know if people understand the orbs. We want to do an experiment to assess whether people understand the orbs, and if they don't understand the orbs, improve the extent to which we're delivering information so that they do understand it. We're not just interested in understanding, we're also interested in whether they're engaged by it, what it makes them think about. So we're trying to do all of that with this orb project. There's a lot of sort of problems we're trying to solve, but the big one being is, are we communicating the thing we want to communicate, and are we creating interest? And maybe also, and I've talked with you orb people a little bit about this, maybe also even in the assessment process, how are people responding in terms of their thinking about whether and what they might do differently if they see the orb exhibiting different colors? Is there any motivation that's coming with that, or is it straight up information? So all of that is possible to solve, and those are all important problems to solve in that particular group. That whole suite of issues are important things to be thinking about and trying to address in the process of doing a study on those orbs. If this group does well, they will learn new stuff, and I'm quite confident they will do this. They will learn new information which will allow us to have much more effective orbs in the dorms. So that's our goal there. So they're generating some ideas about this now, but as soon as they start writing their proposal, they're going to generate more ideas. So as soon as they sit down and start writing, okay, this is what we think we're doing, they're going to have like, oh yeah, there's something we didn't think about that we should have been thinking about. Maybe we should expand our definition of problems and ideas a little bit. So they're gonna expand that. And then next week on Tuesday, they're gonna have a bunch of people review their proposal, and those people are gonna give them a bunch of feedback on their proposals. And when those people give them feedback, these guys are gonna have even more ideas about cool things that they could do with the orb, or ways they could do what they're proposing to do better, or be clear in the way they're articulating what they're doing for those things. So all of those things are feeding back to help generate new ideas in the process. And then they're actually gonna start doing this. They're gonna get a few people together, probably start with some of their friends, roommates, whatever, maybe members of this class, run them through the orb, what the orb can do. And they're gonna very quickly learn that people like certain things, they don't like certain things, they're confused about certain things. And that's gonna change what we're doing on this. We're gonna have to redesign the display a little bit in some ways to make it clear, or maybe redesign the poster that goes with it to make it clear. We're gonna need to do all of that. All of that, everything is feeding back to develop more ideas. I think sometimes as a student going into this, you see people out their world executing on these projects, getting resources, and you ask yourself the question, how did they come up with the idea? And the answer to that question is, as soon as you get into this process, your problem does not become how do you come up with ideas, it's how do you focus on a particular idea, because if you get engaged in this process, you usually end up with too many darn ideas. And the question is not how do I come up with an idea, but how do I figure out which idea I really want to focus on answering, which is the most important idea, which is the one that's going to advance this project, which is the one that's going to have the largest impact on the world. And let me focus on that. And I will tell you that for me personally, I'm trained as a natural scientist. My background is in natural science. I like doing natural science research. I think it's pretty cool. Part of the reason I have shifted my career to focus more on social sciences is because I think our limiting step in changing the world in positive ways is actually mostly not natural science. I'm not saying there aren't lots of natural science problems that really need to be solved in order to create our solutions. I'm just saying I think our biggest problems right now are on the social science front. Psychology and politics, I think, are our limiting factors. When you consider climate change and the uncertainties in future climate models, most of those uncertainties are no longer scientific uncertainties about what happens if you add more CO2 to the atmosphere. I'm not saying we don't have a lot more to learn about the science of climate change, but I'm saying when you look at those intergovernmental panel on climate change models, where they have these different trajections of a possible future warming, like what that's going to look like, those different scenarios are not based on scientific uncertainty. They're based on what the hell human beings are going to do to solve the problem. That's the uncertainty. The uncertainty is in what we're going to do. And so for me, I just feel like bang for the buck in terms of where I can have the biggest impact in trying to address climate change. I feel like, yeah, my biggest buck is not, I like to have eggs in more than one basket. So I've done this, what I consider very cool experiments on biochar and on how you might sequester carbon with biochar that I think is really groovy and very natural sciencey. But honest to God, I think what I do on the sort of psychology front is much more likely to have lasting impacts on the planet than what I do on the biochar front. Not saying the biochar isn't cool, it's very cool. Or the woody agriculture front, very cool stuff. Or the wetland front, very cool stuff. I just don't think it's going to have the impact, because I think that it's our limiting factor is human beings changing the way they behave, changing the way they do politics. That's what's constraining our ability to solve climate change, not uncertainty. I will tell you, in the 80s to the 2000s, I think most of us scientists felt like the challenge with science. We'll get into this more when we talk about the science of talk about climate change. For many years, for most of my career, scientists operated with the assumption that the limiting factor in addressing climate change was scientific uncertainty. That the reason the politicians weren't acting on climate change was because we just didn't have enough evidence about what was going on with climate change. I think most of us in the last decade and a half have changed our minds on that one and said, it has nothing to do with what we know or don't know about science. It has to do with how the hell do you motivate people and politicians to pass different legislation and do things differently. I mean, the Biden bill, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which was basically a giant climate bill, has done vastly more to positively affect climate change than any scientific research done in the last 10 years. It's just a fact, that political bill has had vastly more impact. And I'm not saying we don't want to do science at the same time. I'm just saying you guys have a choice in your life about where you're going to put your energy. And you need to think carefully about what are your skills, what are your interests, but also what is going to have the biggest impact on the world if that's what you want to do. If your goal is to have a big impact on the world, you're trying to align your skills, your interests with leverage points. Where can you do something that's not so big and have a relatively big effect? So anyway, it's all things to think about when you're thinking about this sort of schema of trying to acquire resources to do the things that might affect the world. What are you interested in? Where do your skills lie? And where can you have an impact in the world? It's a little bit of an aside from this, but at any rate, it's not totally, because that's what you're thinking about, with these proposals. Like most of the proposals I write these days are not to get money to do scientific research. They're to get money to do community-based projects, because I think they're going to have more impact than me doing more scientific research. So that's where I focus most of my energy, because I think that's where the bang for the buck is right now. But you write papers, you communicate, that generates more ideas. Everything you're doing is generating more ideas. People review those publications, and that gives you more ideas. So the point of this particular model is just to emphasize good ideas are key. Every step in this process can help you generate better ideas. Hopefully you'll come out of this class with some new ideas. Everything we did last week with those presentations, it was designed to help us generate new ideas about how we can better present information on what Oberlin College is doing in a way that is going to change the way people think about things, increase their understanding, and cause them to do things that are going on at Oberlin elsewhere. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to do. How do we best do that? We're trying to figure that out. That's our job, is to figure out what works, what doesn't work, how can we do better. All right, let me reports, presentations, that's in there too. Let me stop for a moment. I want you to get up and stretch for a moment, because I've been talking for a while and you guys are really quiet and not asking questions, and so it makes me concerned that you're saturating or something like that. So
I'm talking about.
Get up, Max, get up. But for those of you who arrived late, I'll show you the cool orb here. The demo. Hopefully it's working. There's a bug in this orb where I think if I don't mess with it for a while,
Dies.
it stops being controllable by my phone, and I'm trying to figure out whether it's if I reopen the app it'll work. This is orb number 49.
Excuse me.
No, see, this is a problem, guys. We have a bug here, which is that it turns out we need to reboot the orb if you don't mess with it for a while. So that I just rebooted it. It's got a whole computer in it. It's a very impressive little contraption. It's got this tiny little microcontroller that costs $5, but it's incredibly sophisticated. It's got Wi-Fi, it's got Bluetooth, it's like infinitely programmable. It's like vastly more sophisticated than all of the technology on our first spaceships that went out and landed on the moon. I mean, for $4, you can buy a computer. It was just
Lowering the price of it every time you mention it.
vastly more powerful. Yeah.
I can't believe you could do all that for $3.
This is, by the way, the orbs are on a private Wi-Fi network, a password protected Wi-Fi network on Oberlin College. So it's its own Wi-Fi network, which means that other people, for you guys to do this, I have to give you the password. It's on.
So we can hack the databases?
Well, you can, yeah, obviously, you can't hack them because I'm giving them to you. A hacker would be someone from outside getting into.
Well, no, now we're in the system, so now we can mess with it. We can be around over and just be like.
Are you changing the color?
No, because actually these guys are on only the orbs, they have their own private network. their password is Elm Street Elm 122.
Well,
So
we'll
it's
have our
just the
shift.
orbs that have this, they're like, they've got their own network.
Oh wait, I have to miss our shift.
Yeah.
So these are, again, I can control, like, there are 5 different levels for electricity and 5 different levels for water. And in the particular, and I'm actually, right now, I am on the website that is hosted by that $4 chip. That $4 chip is hosting a website.
What?
God.
Yes.
What's
Yeah,
happening?
it's hosting a website. And I can press on these and it now is it's gonna go through the spectrum. So this is intermediate, that's high, and that's very highest. And then it's gonna land on, so it just went through the 5 colors of the electricity spectrum, and now this is
That's
where
so
it will
nice.
land. If it was, which level of energy use right now?
That's 0.
That is the lowest level of energy
That's
use,
50%,
right?
right?
Right, so this is the highest level, so here's what it
It's
would
so,
do,
like,
it will go
anxiety
through
relieving
its
for it going
5
down.
levels to just calibrate you, so you're seeing it, okay, I know what I just saw.
Ooh, that's a really good
Right.
color.
And now it's landing on the highest level, telling you you got highest
Dude,
level.
we got Mars.
And then these are the water ones here, you can press a water one. That's an intermediate water one, but it's now going through its spectrum
third,
of
middle.
water.
4th, higher.
And then that's highest.
That's kind of a nice color.
Now
I don't
see,
know
it's
what
got
it
kind of
is.
an intermediate level there.
I don't know if that pink color should be the highest level, when it makes it in context, but otherwise I'm kind of like, it kind of looks prettier.
Well, it's very hard to do a spectrum that doesn't have any of the electricity colors in it, because you don't want people to confuse them. So it can't have any overlap. And you know, it's a hard one to come up with. But this one's groovy, it's got like this circular thing in it, see how it's sort of vibrating? Anyway, that's
Like an alarm almost.
But if we did that with the highest levels of the energy too, would that be confusing again?
To do the patterns, we wanted different patterns for electricity and water, so the concept was, and I don't know that we realized this that well, the concept was that the electricity would be like a heartbeat, it would be a boom, 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 boom,
Oh,
boom, boom. And if it was a lot of electricity, it would be like this,
oh wow.
you know,
So
and
you-
then the water was more of a shimmer, that's why the water had more sort of an oscillation, it was like shimmering water.
Having fun now. I'm listening, and that's pretty cool.
All right, we are back into the grant writing process. All right, well, we're waiting for a couple of members to come back. Anything you guys were thinking about in the last 10 minutes while I was talking about grant writing? Anything that struck you as, wow, that's interesting? Or, yes, Jasmine Lee, I can tell you want to say something.
Thinking about like what would constitute like a bad, like I feel like to know what's good, we must know what's bad too. So
In a
what would be,
proposal,
yeah, like what would be bad?
not following instructions.
Okay.
Oh,
Because if you don't follow instructions and it's clearly you didn't, your proposal doesn't get reviewed. Because if you're someone receiving a lot of proposals, the first thing you wanna do is weed out all those proposals that didn't meet your criteria, and therefore you don't need to look at them anymore. So your first criteria is, did they follow my instructions? And if they didn't, then they go in a pile of, we're not even gonna look at these, so your proposal doesn't even get read, it doesn't get considered, it's gone. It could be the best idea in the world. Just relating this story, when I was in that 7th grade, I took what was a great English class and had us writing poetry and stuff, and I wrote this poem. And I remember, this is like, it's so imprinted on my brain, I can see this thing returned to me. And the instructor wrote, beautiful poem, you know, exclamation point, D- underneath that. And I hadn't followed the instructions, you know, so it was like, that's nice, but it's not what I asked for, you know?
What were the instructions?
Well, one of the instructions was make sure you include all 5 senses in your poem, and I hadn't done that. You know, it's like, it's a nice poem, didn't follow the instructions. Just saying, it's the same way with proposals.
Also,
I just, that is so ingrained in my brain, that experience, because it was just so heart-wrenching, you know?
I feel like
That D-, damn.
I feel like it's kind of also interesting when you're talking about like how you just like disregard things that don't match your criteria. Same thing with emails, they just like, oh, I don't need to read that. Yes.
Yeah, right, you gotta filter, they gotta filter. Alright, so let's talk about matching goals and funding opportunities. So sources of funding, nonprofit foundations, government, private, all of those exist. I've said a little bit about those. You know, these days, I'd say most of my recent money has come from the Cleveland Foundation, which is a big philanthropic organization in Cleveland, lots of money, and from Ohio Environmental Education Fund / Ohio EPA. Those are the folks I've gotten most of the money I've gotten from recently. Although I've been on National Science Foundation grants too, recently, so those as well. Type of support. So sometimes people are giving money to do programs, to execute on things. And for this class, that's mostly what we're talking about, is the kind of funding someone gets to do a project that's going to benefit the community, as opposed to research funding, which is money to learn something new that isn't known. One of the hardest things to get money for is ongoing program operation. So if you're a nonprofit organization, you need to be constantly seeking money just to sort of like, keep your staff in salary and that sort of thing. And it's very frustrating trying to raise money for things like that, because that's the hardest piece to raise money for, is your staff, your overhead costs running the organization. People don't want to give you money for that. One of my great frustrations with Ohio Environmental Education Fund is they only let you use 35% of an award to cover salary. So if you have a staff member that you're trying to support, and it creates a perverted incentive for applications, because like they have a max, it's not a huge amount of money they'll let you apply for, but theirs max out at $50,000. So that's all you can get is $50,000. And I always apply for $50,000 every grant. And I end up bumping up the proposal with a lot of material I don't need, because I want to get as much money for staff as I can. So I'll put in there all sorts of stuff I don't actually need or want in terms of materials, so I can bump that budget up enough so that I can get the highest possible amount I can get for staffing. Like in this last OEF grant, I still have all this money for materials that I haven't spent, and they won't let me reallocate it towards staffing. They just won't let me cross budget lines on that. And so I have all this money to buy water quality monitoring equipment that I haven't bothered buying yet. It wasn't really relevant to what I was proposing to do, but I made it sound relevant so I could bump up the budget enough so that I could cover staffing. So it's a perverted setup, but most entities are like that. You just have to live with that. It's just a reality of how the world works. Yes, sometimes they'll directly fund you for stuff. It's just, but these are sort of things you need money for, institutional overhead. And if you work for so there's some entities which run on what we would call soft money. Soft money means they run on grant money. They have no hardwired money whatsoever. So look at Oberlin College. Oberlin College has hardwired money in your tuition. So for those of you who are not fully on financial aid, 100% financial aid, the college is obviously using your tuition as one of its key revenue streams to pay my salary, pay to run this thing, this ship, which has a lot of parts that need money to run. So Oberlin is not 100% soft money. You look at the one I'm most familiar with is Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, which I did a little bit of research at for a while. 100% of WHOI, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, runs on soft money, all on grants, which means when you get a grant at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, the institution itself takes about half of it away from you. So when you apply for money, if you apply for $1 million, $500,000 goes straight back to WHOI to just keep the buildings heated and renovated and pay for administrative assistant salaries and all the things that are necessary to run the campus. And only 50% of it is going to you. One of the great things about working at Oberlin College as a researcher, a real advantage of working at a smaller arts college and getting grant funding is, if I was at so-called tier one research institution that was doing principally research, the institution would take away much of the money that I received in grants and use it for their own operations. In the most irritating example of this I experienced in my life, when I was at Yale University in their School of Forestry, I received a fellowship, and the fellowship, an external fellowship, and the fellowship came with, I don't know, let's say, I can't remember what it was, but let's say they gave me $10,000, you know, to buy materials necessary for being a student, you know, computers, that sort of stuff. Yale University took away like 25% of that money that I got for my fellowship to just for themselves. It was just, I don't know, it just seemed so petty to take money from a graduate student. But you know, they felt like we need that for operations. You know, if you're getting any money under the auspices of Yale, we're going to take money away from you to run our show. I remember talking with the head of the Yale School of Forestry and saying, "Are you kidding me? You're going to take away part of my fellowship to run the show?" And he's like, "Yep, that's what we're going to do." You know, so these things happen, but you need support for all of these different categories of things, and you need to think about what you need support for. And usually these are in different budget categories to sort of like, you know, run the gears of your operation. So that's a thing. So we talked about requests for proposals. These are written solicitations by organizations interested in supporting a certain outcome, goals, objectives that describes the process of the grant application. So you get requests for proposals, and then you write a proposal that is a response to that request for proposals. And those are judged by quality, but also, as I've emphasized greatly here, match with the organization priorities, and they must precisely follow specific requirements. So I want you to be anal retentive, if you will, in following the criteria that are listed in the proposal criteria. And as reviewers in next Tuesday's class, I want you to be equally retentive in saying these guys did or did not match these criteria that were put forward, because that's what's going to build your skills as a grant writer. So this gets back to a comment that I think Jane was making at the start of class, where she was saying, you know, I wasn't really thinking about research proposals as planning documents. They really are. And you may have an idea that you think is a really good idea, and you talked about it with people and you're thinking, yeah, this is a really killer idea. As soon as you start to write a proposal based on that, just the mere fact of writing it is going to sort of crystallize those ideas and goals and anticipated outcomes. And oftentimes they're going to cause you to refine your ideas about what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you should do it. It's never the case that you write a proposal that you don't end up changing what you're planning on doing. But a proposal needs to do all these things from a planning perspective. It needs to sort of crystallize your ideas. It needs to provide detailed outline of why, what, and how you're going to do. It needs to define the desired outcome. How do you know that you've succeeded? If you're studying orb patterns, how do you know that you succeeded in that? You know, what constitutes success in that situation? Proposals are also communication documents. So you guys are going to write a proposal, put it in front of me, put it in front of your peers, and we're going to say, yeah, we don't understand what you're doing here and there. And you might say to yourself, well, I totally understand what I'm doing, but if we don't understand what you're doing, then you have not successfully communicated, you know, the scope of what you're planning on doing, your goals, the tasks, the resources you need, the desired outcomes. So that communication is key to funders, but it's also key for getting feedback, so that people can say, yeah, we don't understand this, we do understand that, this seems like a good idea, that doesn't seem like a good idea. So it's very important for that. And as we've already talked about, another key function of a research proposal is acquiring resources. So oftentimes there's no way to do something without getting some money to do it. And so the proposal is the pathway to getting that money so that you can solve the problem that you want to solve. It also ends up being a contract. So, you know, right now I sort of owe a report to the Ohio environmental protection administration, on some things I wanna do with this grant, and so it's a contract. It's like I need to change basically, what I need to do right now with EPA is change the contract, because what we're doing is not quite what we said we were gonna do. So we need to go back and change the contract so that they're okay with us doing the new thing we'd like to do. All right, so finally getting on to sort of the structure, this is basically, what is in your project proposal templates. It's got all of these things. It's got these different sections. Each of these sections has a different function. And so I want to talk a little bit about the function of each of these, because each of these is really important. So this is the overall structure, and now we're going to talk about each of these. A title is super important to a research proposal. A good title summarizes your objectives and your desired outcome. That's like the perfect title. Both of them are in there. It's understandable to whoever the target audience is, but it serves a lot of functions for the recipient. When they get a proposal, the first thing they're going to look at is the title. And it may be that the title itself is enough for them to put it in the pile of proposals we're not going to review because it doesn't seem to match our RFP. It seems to be on a different topic. But minimally, if you get past that first step, it's going to say, oh, they're interested in this particular thing. I know who the right reviewers are for that. I'm going to move this proposal over to their plate because they should be thinking about that. It's not for me to review. So allows the project to be categorized, indexed. Ideally, you're going to get them excited about what you're doing, even with the title. Like I say, it's going to give them that indication of an initial match with their RFP. It also, a good title can establish some credibility on the part. If you've got a title that seems thoughtful, it's the first thing they see. So it's their first impression of you is that title. So it's very important. So an abstract, also sometimes referred to as an executive summary in grant proposals, is a summary of the scope of your work. So it summarizes everything you plan to do. It has a very tight word limit usually to it. And so you have to get the essence of what you're planning on doing into that abstract or executive summary. It has to answer the what, why, and how of what you're going to do. And it's usually the title together with the abstract that the first person looking at your proposal reads to decide where it's going to go next. Who would be an appropriate person to review it, or again, whether it's worth reviewing at all, whether it should just be passed over because it doesn't seem relevant to the RFP. So it's very, very important. I want to stress something about this. The abstract and the executive summary are not the introduction to your proposal. They are the thing people are going to read first, but they are not the introduction. Everything that is in your abstract and executive summary should also be in your proposal. The proposal is a complete standalone document. The abstract is a standalone document. So if you find that you are exactly repeating content that's in your abstract, in your proposal, that's fine, because you don't want anything in your abstract that's not in your proposal. Everything in your abstract should also be in your proposal. So if you have particular phrases or sentences that really summarize your work well, they can go in your background section too, that's fine. But they are standalone pieces. It is not the introduction. So if you find when you're reading someone else's proposal that they have some things in their abstract that are not in their proposal, tell them that that's a no-go. There's nothing that is in the abstract that's not also in your proposal. Okay, so now we get to the background section. This is where you're setting the context for the work you're doing. And this is where the key beginning of the central storytelling goes, where you need to establish the context for your work. What's the big picture of why what you're doing is important? What does the reader need to know in order to understand why what you're doing is important? So you need to talk about what other people have done that's relevant to what you're doing, and especially for research proposals, but also for community types of projects, establishing some sort of a gap in knowledge, something that is not known, that's going to be known as a result of the work you propose to do is really key. Again, this is especially true for research. A good research proposal is all about establishing a gap in knowledge and then demonstrating that you have the skills to fill that gap in knowledge. But for us who are thinking more about community-based work, to establish a problem that needs to be solved. So for instance, our group that is that's focused on community voices, promoting volunteer opportunities, what's the problem that we're trying to solve?
We're trying to like bridge the gap between like the community and the college and make us feel more as one versus separate entities.
Yes, and we're trying to solve the problem that a lot of Oberlin students do not know, that a lot of other students are volunteering in the community and having great experiences that are super valuable volunteering in the community, and that the community welcomes and embraces enthusiastically their volunteer work within the community. So those are all, the fact that that's not known is a problem, and you guys are doing work that's going to solve that problem. So that's what you want to articulate in your proposal, is the problem and the solution you have to that problem. Perfect. So what is known or being done? What important information or service is missing? So that gap there that needs to be filled, that problem that needs to be solved, how the work you propose to do is going to fill that gap or that need. And obviously part of that is establishing that this is actually something important, because there's a lot of stuff we don't know about the world that frankly isn't that damn important. So you need to convince people not only that something isn't known or that there's a problem that can be solved, but that the stuff that isn't known is important to know, and that the problem that needs to be solved is an important problem that needs to be solved. So again, going back to the community voices stuff, you know, being able to articulate why is it important that Oberlin students don't know that the community is welcoming to them and that there are other students doing this. Why is that important? Well, it's important because one of Oberlin's central missions is to develop people who are able to go and engage in communities and make a difference in communities. And Oberlin's a great place to start doing that while you're here. So all of that is a piece of your problem statement / background statement. Then, you know, defining the audience. How and why is the proposed work important? Who will benefit? Who's the audience, and how will they benefit from what you're proposing to do? And of course, all of that information needs to be presented in the context of what does the funding organization actually want? What are they looking for? So you're matching your definition of problems to you know, their definition of problems. So again, going back to, you know, Luke talking about the Great Lakes Protection Fund and the fact that they were more interested in water than I was, I had to talk about how we were super interested in water and what were the problems we were going to solve related to their concern, which was water. Right. Okay, so the proposed solutions and methods. So this is the next section of the proposal. And you know, here you need to define your goals, your objectives, what your intended outcome is for this. How do you know when you've accomplished the outcome that you want? What does done mean for you? So, you know, just sitting on the community voices, you know, we're gonna each conduct 4 or 5 interviews, and each of us is gonna develop, you know, 5 quotes out of each of those. So we're gonna have this many more quotes, and you know, that's when we're done. That's our goal. Program design and experimental design. So how exactly are you gonna do what you plan to do? You know, in their case, they're interviewing people. They're gonna develop some mechanism for soliciting people to interview. They're gonna reach out to a number of different organizations, I imagine. They have some approach that they have, you know, both of you guys have contacts of various sorts that you're gonna use. We're talking about your project. You have various, you know, you're gonna leverage your relationships at Oberlin Community Services. I think you guys said something about working in the schools as well or something like that. You're gonna leverage all of those connections to this. This is where you're describing how you're gonna do that. This is more relevant if you're doing a data-oriented thing, but statistical considerations, replication, repetition, probably not so relevant for most of the work you're doing in this class. The equipment necessary to do what you're gonna do? What do you need in order to do this? I mean, this other group, they need a functional orb that's programmed to do different things. That's one piece of material they for sure need for that. How many people do you need? What sort of human resources do you have? How are you calibrating what you can do to those things? So those are all parts of the methods section or the solution section. And then there's a section on anticipated outcomes where you kind of talk about, and this is different for research. If it's research, what do you expect to observe and why? What are your hypotheses? How are you going to test your hypotheses? A description of independent variables, dependent variables. Again, it's a little different when you're writing a proposal for community-based work and when you're writing a proposal for research. Most of what I have here is mostly relevant to research, probably most relevant to the org group in this class, also relevant to the SIP evaluation group. You know, how are we assessing the impact of what we're putting in front of people? But for most of you, these are more of the questions you're gonna wanna be answering in your methods. What are the specific outcomes? If you're successful, what will you have done? You know, that's kind of the central piece of this section. And then finally, assessment. How are you going to know whether you've achieved certain outcomes? So again, on community voices, I don't know that you're going to get to this part of it, but you know, you could propose, we're going to run these quotes by people in these organizations and by Oberlin students and see how they respond to them. You could do that. I'm not suggesting you do because I'm not sure you'll have time or resources to do that, but it would be one way of assessing that. I mean, if you're just sort of like having a goal of doing a certain number of interviews and a certain number of quotes from each interview, then the outcome is simply that you have created that content and the content is created, and that's an outcome in and of itself. So again, some of these are more researchy, how many samples you need to take, how often, where. Finally, last section, and I'm going through this reasonably quickly because I want to leave a little bit of time for questions. What's the timeline in this? In previous years, I've had students construct what's called a Gantt chart. And I'm going to encourage, I'm not going to require it this time, but look up Gantt, Gantt chart. Look up a Gantt chart because it's a great way of summarizing what you're going to do and the timeline for getting it done. But that's sort of the final component of this. Gantt charts are useful. They're very nice pictorial representations, data visualizations of what you plan to do and when you plan to do it. It's going to do what within your group. And then you guys have the good fortune of not having to write a budget for what you're doing. So I wanted to leave a little bit of time because I covered a lot of ground. You just got an entire grant writing course in a couple hours. So I want to leave a little bit of time for people to ask questions or reflect on anything I've said. Yeah.
Are these slides available elsewhere or that structure available elsewhere so they can access it easily when we're creating these proposals?
They're kind of built into the template, to be perfectly honest, in the criteria. And into materials that I put on into the reading. So I think they're mostly there, but I'll happily post these slides so that you can look at these slides as well. That's fine.
Just a specific question. I know you mentioned you wanted Josette and I to maybe meet with you and Janae about the display case. Did you want that to happen like before we write the proposal?
No, I think you can write the proposal without that. We definitely should be, I think from here on out, you should think of this class as being slightly bifurcated, where your job is to make progress on your projects. You know, we had this sort of thing up front where we were focused on this SIP thing, as sort of a collective project. But now from here until the end of the semester, your largest goal is to make progress on your project and to push me to help you make that progress. So you guys should definitely be pushing me and saying, hey, when is it we can meet with Janae? And then I'll do the scheduled meeting. You know, Luke and Sadie and I are meeting with the teacher we're working with in the school tomorrow. So that's a thing, so we can have a conversation with her. So for several of you who have like basically community partners, for some of you, you can think of me as your community partner, like the org group. There may be some other folks. Oh, on the Lily, did you have a chance to chat with Sammy at all? She was gonna, Sammy Singleton, she's in Harp with you.
Oh, I'm not sure I know who that is.
Okay, anyway, she did a fellowship this summer with me working on community voices stuff.
Cool.
And she's volunteered to sort of like mentor you guys
Oh, that's
in
amazing.
this project. So she's excited to work with both of you on this project and has
Great.
lots of experience. In fact, I think she did a whole bunch of OCS interviews this summer.
Oh,
so-
cool. Okay, great.
Yeah, so she's gonna be like a key, obviously, OCS itself is a community partner, as are all the organizations that you might be interviewing people with, but I wanted to give, put it this way, I wanted to give you Sammy as a resource. So you guys have that, and I chatted with Sammy the other day. She said, oh, I think Lily's in Harp, and I said, yeah.
Cool, yeah.
She said, I'll look them up, yeah, so. Okay, other, yes,
Can you go back to the assessment slide, please? And then, can you go over again how to get to the project templates for the specific?
right,
projects?
okay, so good question. Let's go to,
You get this, yeah,
let's go,
dun, dun, dun.
As officers.
I'm just starting at the schedule and I'm gonna click on assignment drop because that's an easy way to find anything that's an assignment. There's a couple different sections for this. There's non-project assignments and then there's project assignments. And there's the project proposal initials, and this is the folder that contains your sort of first draft project proposals. You will have a chance to revise these. That's why there's another folder as well. But did everyone find that okay? And again, these things, they already have your name on them, and kind of like a, if they got title on the file, that doesn't need to be the title of your that you put in there, but it should be enough of an indication for other people to know what's going on. So this, by the way, is where you will be commenting on, in my other class, I'm doing things a little bit differently. Normally, the review process is anonymous. You don't know the people who've reviewed your proposals, and it frees up the reviewers to be super critical if they want to be super critical of your work. We're not going to do that in this class. I am doing that in the other class, but we're not going to do that here. So we're going to comment on each other's proposals, and those comments will be directly visible. And that's okay. I still want you to be as critical as you can be, critical but constructive. So don't say, that's stupid. That would be unkind. But say, I think they could do this better by doing this. That's a constructive and critical. I wasn't anticipating the stupid comment, but yeah. Right. Other questions? You guys are remarkably quiet. I was expecting you guys to have much more questions on this.
It's cloudy, retired.
It is cloudy, but I'm just saying for a lot of you people, proposal writing is gonna be something really important in your lives. You gotta get excited about it because it's cool. People will give you money to do cool stuff. And if you can write a good proposal, you can write your own ticket for doing things that you wanna do. It's like, yeah. It's cool.
Just from my personal experience where I'm coming into this class from, you're giving me a lot of really good information that to me seems very easy to take in. I've talked with people whose job it is to write proposals before. I have learned from professors in social sciences about their process of developing research plans, which overlaps a lot with writing proposals. I've talked with professors who have talked to us about the actual process of writing proposals and have apologized profusely during April when they are swamped with writing proposals.
Right.
So just make you feel better. I'm getting this
Oh,
and like
good.
you're
I don't
providing-
feel bad.
you're covering a lot of information. I don't feel like I need to
Okay,
ask questions.
fine, that's good, that's good, you know, it's like, it's a comment someone made at the start, I'm forgetting who made the comment. At least I took it this way, when you guys were presenting, maybe it was Sadie, I'm guessing here, Sadie or Josette. But the situation of like being aware of the people receiving the information. But like all of us who present professionally for a lot of our lives, and obviously that's what we do as teachers. You want to get real-time feedback from people. You want to be able to sort of see people responding because then you adjust what you're doing in response to what they're doing. So it's easiest to present when you can experience the energy coming back from people and interpret that energy in a way that allows you to adjust what you're doing, you know what I'm saying? So like, that's what was great about the presentations you guys were doing is, for the most part, those alums were pretty excited and you could see where they were excited, what they were excited about, and kind of like, you know, try to feed them what it was that was getting them excited, if you want. Is that making sense? Totally.
So you're saying we don't have good energy today?
I'm just saying, I'm not feeling the energy. I'm not in any way being critical of you. It's just like on my end, it's harder to know where to go if I'm not getting feedback because I don't know whether I'm successful or I'm not successful. You know what I mean? It's just easier when I'm feeling it, because yeah.
I think maybe the reason why we're not being as talkative is because we haven't like actually sat down and like
Yeah,
started
totally,
writing
totally.
proposals. Like I get all the concepts, but
Yeah.
I think like when Sammy and I start doing
Yeah,
it,
totally,
that's when we're
totally.
gonna-
I
yeah.
totally get that. And it is writing, the skill of writing proposals is much like building something with like a bunch of woodworking tools. It's like someone can tell you how the woodworking tools work, but until you actually start using them, it's just an abstraction. It's like, yeah, I know a circular saw will cut straight lines. I know a sawzall will cut curved lines. I know I can use a drill press to put holes in things. But until I use them, it's just kind of like, I know that they do that, you know, so yeah, cool, right. All right, we're done, guys.
Thank you for the analogy.
So again, if you guys have a chance to get together with your group mates and make any progress on your proposals before next class, we'll be more efficient in the time we spend together next class. So the more you can do before then, the more useful next class will be.
I feel like my data and Wi-Fi weren't working, so it's basically useless break. It was really horrible, but I got a refresh, so my battery is worse now than it was, but like obviously environmentally sustainable, so I didn't get a break, so that's good. Like, my battery before was at 97% capacity.
I have like.
So
all
you
the
know where
batteries.
Langston is, right? It's right across the
And
street
we
from
can
the
figure
tank.
out sometimes.
The entrance, the schools, you can't get into the schools are locked, as one might expect.
Yes,
You have to walk around the
That-
back.
that will work
So
for
it's
me.
the entrance in the back.
Well, let me double check.
Like, if
I
you look
think
back, they've got like a
I have
football
six-
field back there,
six
and then
is
they've
what I
got
have
the screen
cooperative, and
covered
after that,
awning. And there's
I
only
think I
one
have-
more that you can get in back there, it's really
Yeah.
obvious.
really
I
like
can do
the
like
classes.
three,
There's
I
an
can do like
administrative
3 till
assistant
6.
there, and Donna's gonna meet us right
Yeah.
there at the meeting
Okay.
time, so all three of us will just meet back there, but it's the opposite side of the school. There's like a very front-looking door, when you look at it, I don't think that's ever been.
Yeah, you can
It's
do
the one in the
45.
back, in and
Okay,
out.
cool. I can work on
Maze,
proposals,
and that's where we're gonna.
and then we work on it together. I can't do it before, we work it together. I don't think I can be corner.
This is Maria or Marina?
Oh, yeah, and